Welcome to the April 12th, 2023 meeting of the Fitchburg City Council as a Whole Committee. I now call this meeting to order. Please be advised that FATV is conducting audio and video recording of this meeting for public broadcast. I ask that anyone else in the audience who is recording this meeting please identify themselves for the record now by standing and stating their name and city of residence. Seeing none, at this time, I would ask that all electronic devices be placed into silent mode. Councillor Squalia, would you please lead us in the salute to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councillor Squire.
Present.
Councillor Van Hazinga.
Here.
President Zarella.
Here.
Councillor Boschman.
Present.
Councillor Kuchar.
Here.
Councillor Cragen. Councillor Cruz.
Here.
Councillor Di Natale.
Here.
Councillor Fleming.
Here.
Councillor Green. Councillor Schultz.
Here.
We have 9 members present.
Thank you very much. The public had been advised to contact the clerk's office regarding comments of no more than 2 minutes. I have none before me. Anyone in the audience wishing to participate in public comment, please approach the center podium, identify yourself by name and city of residence, and indicate the item on the agenda on which you wish to speak. Seeing none, we have 2 items on our agenda this evening. 09823 and 09923, increases in water rates and charges and wastewater rates and charges, and it is my understanding that those will be presented together. All right, in that case, you may proceed when ready.
Mr. President, I'd like to make an opening statement, please.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. First of all, I want to mention that the process to come to where we are this evening was certainly extensive, and our thanks go to Ref Tellis and Weston and Sampson for their efforts. They did an outstanding job. What you're going to decide tonight is very, very important. It's always difficult when we're talking about adding to people's costs and whatnot, but if we want to maintain one of our more pristine assets, and that's our water, and the process that we go through for wastewater, we certainly need to pass this along, and I hope you will. I just have a few points to impart on you. On the water side, the Water Division has held off on rate increases for as long as possible. Our retained earnings are low and will go negative next fiscal year. Although the Water Division has aggressively undertaken a number of important capital projects since the last rate increase: water main replacements, water meter replacement project, Falula transmission main replacement project, the Oak Hill water storage tank replacement project, supervisory control and data acquisition system upgrades, and more. The city is being required to address a number of additional system-wide issues that are identified in an administrative consent order from Mass DEP. Additionally, the city has very old water mains, some 100+ years old, 2 20-year-old treatment facilities, 16 dam dikes, the majority of which are 80+ years old, and more that are all in various states of need. If this rate increase is not passed, the general fund will need to begin subsidizing the Water Enterprise Fund, and it could require layoffs, plant closures, compliance issues, fines, and potentially the inability of the city to provide clean, safe drinking water to its residents. On the wastewater side, the Wastewater Division has been aggressively tackling its obligations under the consent decree with the U.S. EPA and Department of Justice. The consent decree mandates a plethora of capital projects, assessments, and studies, including combined sewer separation, that must be completed by the year 2030. The consent decree is a direct result of the city's choice many years ago to ignore major system-wide deficiencies, environmental violations, and the resulting mandates from the U.S. EPA and Mass DEP, kicking the can down the road, so to speak, ladies and gentlemen. Now we are legally required to complete all of the projects identified in the consent decree, and the city will face serious consequences if we do not. The rates must be raised to support the projects that are required over the next 5 years. The bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, the city has done everything possible to hold off on rate increases as long as we possibly could, and have done an enormous amount of work to identify the least impactful rate increases necessary to keep operations going. We need to pass the rate increase now. Otherwise, the Water Division will be headed towards the equivalent of a consent decree, and the Wastewater Division will be unable to comply with theirs. Both would have disastrous outcomes for the city. This is not a situation where we can wait and see if we'll get by. We know what our future costs are going to be on both water and wastewater. Those are not going to change. We need to raise rates to be able to handle these costs. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and now I hope you'll partake of the presentation. Enjoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the team can go right ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dave Fox. I'm with Raftellus. We are sub-consultant to Weston & Sampson on this rate study project. A little bit about my firm just to kick off. And Mr. Mayor, that's going to be hard to follow. I think you did it probably better than I'm about to. So we're hiring if you're looking for another job on the side. Raftellus is the largest firm in the country, predominantly focused on water, sewer, and stormwater rate and financial related issues. We are a nationwide firm, and I lead our New England office based out of Natick, Massachusetts. I've completed hundreds of rate studies at this point in my career, and I can confidently say, and something I'm going to get into in just a little bit, this has been one of the most comprehensive analyses that we've gone through on a rate study of trying to ensure good, clean, safe drinking and wastewater for the city, while at the same time mitigating to the greatest degree possible the impacts on customers. So I'm going to give a little bit of an overview. I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues, Sam and Pat, periodically throughout the presentation, just to save my voice a little bit. So we will get through this as efficiently as we possibly can. There's a lot of information in here, but I want to make sure we take the time necessary to really drive the points home and have you understand the situation that we're dealing with.
And before you begin, I'm just going to ask councilors, please allow the presentation team to set their breakpoints for questions. We don't want to be, interrupting them midstream. So we'll take questions at whatever points throughout the presentation you feel are good breakpoints, or just all at the end, if that's how you prefer to do it.
I have no preference. If there's a burning question that needs to get answered right in the middle, I'm not going to take any offense to somebody asking me to pause for a second and respond. Otherwise, we're more than happy just to respond to them all at the end.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. First, I want to give a little bit of background and an overview of what a rate study is, what a financial planning study is for water and sewer funds. The purpose of a rate study is to ensure the long-term financial sustainability and operational sustainability for the city's water and sewer funds. So this means generating enough money on an annual basis that both the water and sewer funds can fully finance all of their expenditures and expenses on an annual basis, such that they can provide good, clean, safe service. We don't have any reliability issues or water quality issues. That level of service that the city residents have come to know and require, we need to maintain that into the future. And a lot of this is coming due to just consent decrees and orders saying that the city has to do these things, and the alternative, there really is no other alternative. It's going to be more costly. In doing this rate study of trying to establish a sustainable financial position and an operational position well into the future for both funds, we also analyzed what the impacts were going to be to customers. And I'm going to talk about this in a little bit. Again, recognizing that we need additional revenue, but trying to mitigate that increase on customers to the greatest degree possible while not sacrificing the quality of service. And we also looked at miscellaneous fees and charges, things outside of the normal water rates that the customers are charged. We just wanted to make sure that they aligned with the amount of time that the water and sewer departments are spending on these types of initiatives. And we have some slides on that in the back end. To provide just a bit of context before we even begin, water rates have been increasing by about 5% every single year across the country for the last 20 years or so. More than twice the rate of inflation. Every single year, water rates have been going up by about 5%. Sewer rates have been going up by about 6% over that exact same time period across the country. And the issues that the city of Fitchburg is dealing with regard to inflationary impacts, with regard to the need for renewal and replacement of aging infrastructure, things like declining consumption. You are not alone in this boat. Every other water and sewer utility that is run by municipality and not run by municipality across the country are dealing with these exact same issues. This is my third rate study presentation this week already, and I've had these conversations for the past few months getting ready for this upcoming fiscal year, and I can assure you that every other community in the Commonwealth around New England and around the country are dealing with these exact same issues. I'm not sure that provides you any comfort, but maybe just a little bit. So with regard to the financial planning process, I'll just go through this at a pretty high level. What we do is we develop a long-term financial planning model where we look at all of the costs that are incurred by the water and the sewer funds currently and what those costs are going to look like in the future. We look at operating expenses. We look at existing debt service schedules, the principal and interest payments for existing debt service loans, when those loans are falling off and trying to time them with new loans coming on to pay for projects. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And try to develop to the best, the best degree possible for the next 5 years how much money needs to get generated annually from both the water and the sewer funds to have financial sufficiency as well as viability. We take that as one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is how much money are we currently generating out of revenues, and how do we think that revenue base is going to change over time? I mentioned earlier that we've been seeing reductions in per capita consumption on an annual basis. That is mostly due to the implementation of high-efficiency fixtures, low-flow toilets, low-flow shower heads. Just by the nature of those inventions, we are seeing reductions in consumption, and that is reducing the revenue base for both the water and the sewer funds without any cost pressures, which are also present. So we're comparing two sides of the equation. How much money do we need to generate, and how much money are we currently generating under rates, and how is that going to change over the next 5 years? We also monitor, from a financial viability standpoint, how much money do the water and sewer funds have in reserves? Everybody around this room should have a savings account. Water and sewer funds are no different. There are potential sharp fluctuations from year to year in terms of consumption, which can have significant volatility on the revenue base. Having a pocket of money sitting in a reserve fund will help mitigate the risk of that volatility. Also, new regulations that pop up that are happening all the time that we weren't thinking about today that might pop up 2 years from now. It's nice to have a savings account sitting there so we can be financially flexible and not have to deviate significantly from the rate plan that we're going to share with you this evening. Just to get a little bit into the process here, I can't stress this enough, and I said this at the beginning. This has been one of the most comprehensive and intensive rate studies that I've ever been a part of. We have ran more scenarios than I probably would have liked, and I think everybody at these two tables probably would have liked. Looking at things like different cost structures, pushing out capital improvements plans, looking at capital improvements is this a necessity, and delaying anything that is not a necessity, looking at rate increases, looking at reserve fund balances, and through multiple iterations and meetings with the DPW, water and sewer divisions, as well as city auditor, the mayor's team, finance staff, had multiple meetings discussing this and came to the final realization of the final product that we're sharing with you tonight, which I think is a culmination of all of that work trying to, again, ensure the sustainability of the water and the sewer funds well into the future, while at the same time mitigating customer impacts. Those are two competing objectives, but we try to accomplish those to the best degree possible. So I'll start with the water fund. We're going to break this up into kind of two sections, the water and the sewer, and then we'll end with some combined customer impacts. The vast majority of the residents are water and sewer combined customers, so we want to look at what the actual bill is they're going to be seeing, and then we'll end with a couple of affordability metrics and some miscellaneous fee slides. So a bit of a water fund overview up on the top of this, and if you can see on the slides in front of you, these are the revenue requirements of the costs that are forecasted to be required from the water fund currently in 2023, where we think we're ending, what the 2024 budget looks like, and what our forecast is for 2025 and 2028. Within this, I'll notice I'll make a couple notes of personnel expenses. You see a sizable increase from 2023 to 2024. This is largely due to personnel vacancies in 2023 and the assumption of full staffing levels in 2024 and beyond. So it's not an increase in salaries by that amount. It's actually just getting to full staffing. You can see things like general water expenses, the water treatment expenses at the regional water facility, the reimbursements to the city. You can see the debt service principal and interest payments on an annual basis. And as I mentioned, we took into consideration the debt service that you have currently on the books and when that debt service is going to be falling off, and then the addition of new debt service to try to smooth that out as much as we possibly can. And we're not issuing debt for everything. You can see that cash funded capital line on the bottom of that table. We are cash financing or paying for out of rates for some of the capital improvements, but for the larger expenditures, which my colleagues are going to get into in just a little bit, it does make sense to debt finance these projects. I am a fan of water and sewer utilities issuing debt for large ticket items that are going to last a long period of time and spread those impacts out over a longer period of time of customers rather than cash financing them and require a significant rate increase to be able to pay for that. A couple notes, the operation and maintenance expenses are projected to increase by 18% from 2023 to 2024. A lot of this is that increase in personnel expenses, getting to full staffing. My colleagues will get into this in a little bit more detail, but from 2023 to 2029-ish, the water fund is expected to spend approximately $9.7 million annually in capital improvements. As Mr. Mayor noted at the beginning, the water fund has not had a rate increase since 2019, and we're going to see the impacts of that in just a little bit. Has delayed an increase as long as possible until the point where we can't delay any longer, and I'm going to show you why in just a little bit, and we need that rate increase. And part of that is because retained earnings or that reserve fund balance are approaching zero to where we can't delay a rate increase any further, or that is going to go negative and require general fund subsidies and cuts and things like that, and potentially sacrifice the level of service within the city, which I would argue is not really an option.
Could you just repeat that figure, the amount we're going to be spending
About $9.7 million annually.
each year?
Yes.
I have a question. Do you mean that we don't have new rate increases? Because I believe in 2018, we voted on like a 5-year plan that had a pre-planned year-by-year rate increase. It was like 10% every year. Is that what you mean by?
That was for the wastewater division only. So he's just going through the water fund right now, and then we'll get into the wastewater.
Didn't we have a similar kind of stacked plan for the water fund?
It ended in 2019. That was the last increase. It was the previous 5 years.
Oh, it was the previous 5 years
Yeah,
before
we haven't
that?
had since FY19.
Okay.
Yes, so the rates have been steady since that point on the water side. They have not been increasing at all.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Sam to go through a little bit of an overview of the water fund, and then I'll jump back in a little bit. Thank you.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Sam Kenny. I'm a team leader with Weston and Sampson with a technical focus on the drinking water infrastructure side of things. So Dave just touched upon it, the $9.7 million of annual capital improvements. It's worth expanding on what that really means. So that's kind of what the next few slides are walking through. Is when we say capital improvements, what has the city been doing? What are you in the process of doing? What is upcoming? And I like to start with this slide and some of the projects you see up here. The mayor also touched on this. These projects are being effectively mandated to the city by Mass DEP. These are the non-optional projects. You are under administrative order to address these, or they are sanitary survey items that will soon become administrative order items. I'll highlight just a couple of the projects that correspond with the photos, one being the Meeting House Gatehouse rehabilitation. This is currently in design. That's what this top facility is. It doesn't look like a lot, but about 2/3 of the entire city's drinking water passes through this structure. Its original kind of function dates back to 1898, so it's a very old piece of infrastructure that plays a very key role in the overall water system operations. The other project up here in the photo format is the Oak Hill tank replacement. That is ongoing. That photo is from about 2 or 3 weeks ago. It is actively being replaced right now. It's replacing a tank that was originally constructed in 1960, so a 70-year-old feature. And I'll hit on this bottom bullet again. The city is subject to fines for noncompliance with these orders. Again, these projects up here that have been completed, are being completed, will be completed, really fall into the non-optional category. The dams were also mentioned earlier. The Water Division owns and operates 16 dams, which is a very high number. That number puts you in the top 3 of all municipalities in the entire state in terms of how many dams fall under your purview. So a very high number. Some of the dams' high hazard ratings expected to cause loss of life and failure. These are very serious items. The bullets at the bottom is really where I'd like to linger. 3 of the dams have been noted as non-compliant by the Office of Dam Safety and have been downgraded to poor condition within the last year. These are also aging pieces of infrastructure. They're not getting any better. They need attention. That last bullet, the Dam Safety Office really does have the ability to assess a fine up to $5,000 per day per dam for noncompliance. If you want to extend that over a full year, you're talking $1.8 million for each dam if they ever actually levy these noncompliance fines against you. The scale of the project and what we're talking about is large. So you might be tempted to say, okay, well, if it's so much to fix it, it's so much to repair it, why don't we just get rid of it? I just want to expand upon that of the permitting, design, and construction of even a controlled dam breach or something like that. It's still a very expensive project. So there's a lot of cost that goes into these items. I won't linger on the first 2 bullets a lot. The city has just replaced 11,000 meters across the entire city. They're also in the process of finalizing implementation of instrumentation and control upgrades across all of the water facilities. These are major improvements for the entire water system as a whole. I will linger a little bit on the treatment plants. The regional plant is approaching 30 years of active service life. The Falula plant is approaching 20 years. These plants sit at an inflection point where they're going to need rehab efforts. In this industry, 25 years plus or minus is really what's considered the useful life of a lot of these core pieces of equipment. There's going to be things that happen, and this top picture and the bottom picture are things that indicate that. The reason the pump on the left looks to be a different color is because that pump failed last year and required replacement. The media in the photos below, again, doesn't look like much. That's a fairly serious failure of the media bed at the regional plant. These things happen. The infrastructure is aging. It needs to be addressed. I also have a couple bullets up there about water quality regulations. It's a constantly changing game. PFAS is up there. That's something that's really permeated the national discussion. There's, some of you may be aware, proposed regulation right now for the EPA to drop that even further. So how that will impact the city may not be fully understood yet. But there's also future compound standards that come later, things that we don't even know about yet. 10 years ago, no one really knew what PFAS was. So there's always a next wave, and that kind of underscores the need for capital planning and capital reserves. And the last thing I'll touch upon is your distribution system. The City of Fitchburg distribution system has over 1 million feet of pipe in it, which is a staggering number when you really kind of step back and think about it. There's infrastructure still in active service that dates back to the 1890s. Ideally, you'd be replacing about 10,000 feet every single year, which would be about 1% replacement of your system annually. The last time that a project like that was completed was 2018. And the photos up here, that's not from somewhere else. Those were all pipes removed from active service as part of that 2018 project. There's going to be a need for additional distribution system improvements. So high-level overview of some of these capital projects, some of the need, they're critical. They are critical projects that really support and underscore the health and longevity of this system. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to Dave.
If I could just add a couple things before we start. The Meeting House Gatehouse, where Sam had talked about, 60, 70% of the water that comes to the city, we've done a lot of repairs there over the decades, new traveling screen inside and things like that, but now it needs to be totally rehabbed. We just can't keep doing spot repairs. We're going to have to take that gatehouse offline and still get water to the city by bypass pumping that gatehouse through the treatment plant. So it's a big job. We're going to have to make a cofferdam to isolate the gatehouse, then disassemble the gatehouse and work where the water comes in, that channel, have to reinforce it. That's just granite. It's not concrete walls or anything like that. It's just granite. And the pieces of granite have fallen off at times and got in there and jammed those traveling screens, which keeps the debris out. So, I mean, we've done all we can. At this point now, we need to do a major project because there's no replacing the traveling screens. We need to reinforce the walls inside and just do the whole thing over. Otherwise, we won't have water at some point. And a couple times a rock has fallen in there and jammed up the traveling screens. And it was during the winter months, and then things freeze up very quickly at that point. Just with ice and everything, if the water's not moving, it could have been catastrophic. We were able to, to mitigate, get it out of there and get things going again. But those are the type of things, even though they're mandated by DEP, we still need to do them because it's important to, be able to keep water coming to the city. As Sam touched on, we have 16 dams all under the water, never mind whatever else the city has. Now, like he said, these dams are 80, 120 years old, and despite our mowing them and doing everything else, they slowly deteriorate over time. Subsoil from just water flowing through them, you get sinkholes and things like that, and at some point they need to be rehabbed completely. And we've kind of kicked the can down the road a little bit with those, and we just can't anymore because they've got to the point where there's enough settlement, enough issues with the drains inside the dam that we can't do without draining the reservoir and completely rehabbing the dam, make repairs to them. Those are huge projects, multi-million-dollar projects, and we really need to do that. Otherwise, we're going to end up losing a reservoir because we're going to have to lower the water body permanently because the dam's not safe. Otherwise, it could fail and cause loss of life, which is something we don't want, of course, happen. So I just want to emphasize a couple of those things. It's like, even though DEP or Office of Dam Safety is doing it, there's reasons why. Despite our best efforts, these are big projects that need to be completed.
Great, thanks for that, John. This last slide, or not last slide, unfortunately, this slide up on the screen now is more just a takeaway, just a summary of all the information that Sam and John just went through, showing you the projects broken out, the timing of them, and the magnitude of those projects. Just a quick slide here, and I don't want to dwell on this too long. When we're talking about adding new debt, one of the things we always look at is how leveraged a system is, and by leveraged, I mean how much debt does that have compared to a couple other metrics. And one that we utilize is just outstanding water debt per customer. Currently, Fitchburg has about $1,400 per customer in water debt. The Northeast average, based on a financial database, is about $3,200. And even after we get to that 2028 period, after the 5 years of issuing new debt for a lot of these projects, we're still below that amount. When we get to the sewer slide, you're actually going to see that it's above that that regional average. That is not a concern whatsoever. Well within the ballpark of reasonability. It's not an indication of an over leverage whatsoever. But I know there have been some concerns in the past of adding debt, and again, this plan is taking that into consideration, ensuring that we're managing that debt well, so that we can spread costs out over a longer period of time and not impact ratepayers more than we already have to. So I think these next two slides are incredibly telling. This is a cash flow chart of the water fund starting in 2023 going out to 2028. The columns on this chart are costs and revenue requirements, if you will, how much money needs to get generated annually, and the line going across is revenue under your existing rates. And so what you can see is every year over the 5-year forecast from 2024 to 2028, the water fund without a rate increase is going to generate a deficit, and significant ones throughout the entirety of the forecast. That is even more indicated by looking at where the reserve fund balances will go. Now, you'll remember when I said at the part of the outset, it is important to maintain a strong reserve fund balance for financial viability, for financial flexibility purposes. This is doing the exact opposite of that without rate increases, where that reserve fund balance would actually go negative in 2024 and continue to go negative out through 2028, where there would be about a $13 million hole. Mr. Mayor talked about this earlier. There would have to be things like a general fund subsidy. You probably would not be eligible for some of the loans that we're talking about by not having a financially sound utility. Again, putting an even further burden on the financial outlook of the water fund. So this is an unsustainable picture under current rates. So where does that get us to? Our recommended rate increases. So in order to ensure financial sufficiency over the next 5 years, we are recommending the following rate increases. A 35% rate increase in 2024, followed by 2 years of 12% rate increases, and then another 2 years of 5% rate increases. And I would ask you to hold your judgment on what that means for actual customers in terms of their bill until we get to that portion of the presentation later. As I said earlier, most of your customers are both water and sewer customers. With the sewer increase that we're talking about, the impact to most customers in 2024 will be at about 15%, and we're going to get into what that actually calculates to in terms of actual dollars that they're going to be spending more. So I'll ask you just to wait until we get that slide to really take in what these impacts are to customers. We are recommending to increase both the volumetric and the minimum fixed charge by the same percentage points. We did look at potentially going up by more than one or the other. We still need 35% more revenue in 2024, but we did not think that was a great idea by maybe going up on volumetric a little bit more. What that would do is allow for more volatility in the fund, and with the increases and the financial situation we're already dealing with, we want to mitigate that volatility to the greatest degree possible. So here you can see the projected water cash flow with those increases that I just went through. We are meeting or exceeding our revenue requirements every single year with the rate increases. And what that allows us to do is to take that reserve fund balance, which is approaching zero, and start to grow it. It does not quite get up to our target line of about 100 days or a full year or 365 days of O&M, but it is moving in the right direction. I think it would be irresponsible, and we had many conversations about this, of raising rates to get us up to that target amount quicker. I think that would lead to unnecessarily high rate increases, again, trying to mitigate those rate increases on customers. The fact that we're moving in an upward trajectory and starting to build on that fund balance, have financial sufficiency, I think this is the strong message that we're trying to send here. I will move on to sewer now.
Could we go through questions for water?
Will that be disruptive to you?
Not disruptive at all. Feel free.
All right. Councillor, go ahead.
Thank you. So the water fund overview slide, these are all the projects that are included in the proposed 35%, et cetera, increase.
That is correct.
And with the years that we're doing them. So the 7 million, this that's part of the ARPA funded Boulder, Maine water project?
Yeah, that's not calculated to the rates. It's separate from that because it's, doesn't add anything to the rate, so.
The ARPA doesn't, right? And this 7 million is in addition to the ARPA funded increases?
That is correct.
Thank you. And so the financial database for the Northeast, what is the financial database?
That's an internal database that we collect from our thousands of clients we have, and we are privy to their financial information, and so we collect that so we can get some valuable information out of it.
So this is Raft-Ellis's financial.
That's correct.
Proprietary database.
Yes, and if you actually looked at Moody's, which I think you might have to pay for, it's a rating agency, it actually comes out pretty darn close to that amount as well.
And what is the definition of Northeast?
New York, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, and I believe New Jersey.
Okay, thank you. And so the minimum, so we're raising the volumetric and the minimum the same percentage to ensure that that we don't have volatility in our revenue sources.
That's correct. If we were to push more into the volumetric revenue stream, if we were to see that volatility in consumption on an annual basis, which we see from time to time, predominantly due to weather. So if you can imagine a very cool, wet spring, summer, fall, folks aren't watering their lawns as much, they're not doing as much outdoor irrigation. We see consumption fall during those periods of time. Now, when that consumption falls, if it's an anomalous year in terms of rainfall and cool weather, that can be a significant reduction in consumption, which cannot allow the revenue to meet what our budgeted amount is. And for that, again, because of all these expenditures we're talking about going forward, and because we're already starting in a pretty poor financial position, we're trying to benefit it. I don't think it makes sense to do anything that would lead to greater volatility in the water fund at this point in time.
Do we have an average on how many customers in an average year have the minimum usage?
Yes, it's very little. If you hold that question to the end, I can give you an exact answer.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
One question myself, actually. Are we seeing, I think I remember asking this several years ago during another rate presentation. It might have even been 2017 or something. But basically, I guess to put it as simply as possible, is there light at the end of the tunnel? Are we seeing a point at which these costs are going to start to level off and we're going to not need to continue escalating the rate beyond the rate of, inflation and other associated cost rises?
I think that's a complicated question, and it varies for water and sewer. I think on the water side, there is light at the end of the tunnel, but it's many years out in the future just due to the age of the system and the magnitude of projects that need to be undertaken to renew some of that infrastructure. The light at the end of the tunnel is a little bit closer, I guess, on the wastewater side, just because the consent decree has an end goal of 2030. So once we're through the projects that are required under the consent decree, theoretically we'll have combined sewers fully separated. Our wastewater plant will be meeting all of its discharge requirements. So at that point, it's transitioning to managing the assets that are starting to decay to the point to need rehab or replacement. So I think it's different because the two systems are vastly different in different states of need.
Makes sense. Thank you.
John and Mark, I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
Just to add, the materials cost has dramatically gone up. I mean, everybody's paying more for electricity and heating fuel, but even, and maybe Sam could speak to it a little bit, but just water main, fittings, our chemicals, even beyond, inflationary increases. It's cost much more. I'm hoping that will at some point will level off, but we're just not seeing it. So, water main project, Sam, maybe you can speak to what Weston and Sampson has seen in the last few years about the cost per foot, basically.
Yeah, so the city's primary water main material is ductile iron, which is frankly what most people default to in the Northeast. Ductile iron used to be fairly easy to get. Now, pretty standard sizes in water mains are 8 and 12 inch. It can be 40 to 50 weeks to get pipe to complete a project of any true size. Material cost is probably 200 to 250% what it was about 10 years ago. It's gone up significantly, and then it doesn't even touch upon the labor to actually get it into the ground. So it is sizable. It's not 5%. It's hundreds of percents.
So basically, everybody's seeing an impact on their bottom line, their budgets, but we're seeing the water and probably wastewater as well is seeing even a much worse situation, unfortunately. So we're hoping at some point it'll taper off, but right now it's just, as Sam said, I mean, when you're talking a year to get, 40 weeks to a year to get a water main for a project, I mean, you're not going to get it cheaply.
Right, right. And to be clear, I fully understand that these are factors outside your control.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get a prognosis straight in my head so that when I go out and talk to people, I can give them a clear picture of what we're looking at.
On the wastewater side, we're not seeing quite as dramatic of a price increase in pipe materials, but I know Mark has seen an incredible increase in the price for chemicals used for the treatment process. I'll pass the mic over to him.
So when it comes to the wastewater department, the primary drive has been the consent decree. And the benefit so far has been a tremendous upgrade at the wastewater treatment plant. And so we're meeting a lot of the limits they set for us right now, with the exception of rain events. And that's due to the sewer system, which we're starting to address now. There's so many miles of sewer system that has broken pipes, infiltration, leakages. That's what we're trying to address mainly with this next sewer rate increase, is dealing with those sewer improvements that are mandated by the consent decree. So there is light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to the wastewater department, because at one point, we're going to have everything separated. We're going to have a treatment plant up to date. So the needed revenue increase will not be anything like it is now. It'll probably be just, due to inflationary concerns like with chemicals. There was a few chemicals last year that went up over 100%. And unfortunately, our chemicals are flow-based. They're based on the water coming into the plant. And if we have infiltration coming in, we're treating that as just as if it was from someone's toilet. And so when we reduce the infiltration coming down the treatment plant with all the sewer improvements, we'll be saving on that end also. Okay?
Makes sense. Thank you. Councillor Van Hazinga.
Thank you, Mr. President. So we have a pretty sizable water infrastructure in our city. We have a lot of reservoirs. We have 2 plants. Do we have the right size infrastructure? If consumption continues to decline and become more efficient, is there any point, big picture wise, that we should step back and take a look and do we have the right infrastructure for our needs? Do we need, for example, 2 plants? Do we need all of the reservoirs in operation? How does our capacity compare to what our needs are as a city?
At some point, it may be possible, but not at this time. We can supply the whole city through the plant in Westminster, but we can't do the same with the other plant. And we have shut down the other plant for months on end, just because we've had some issues with water quality up there. Nothing has it, just a high color and, with heavy rains and things like that. So, the plants, you really need both of them, because if something happened with one, you'd have the other. If we could take all the reservoirs and put them in one spot and through one plant, that would be all set. But we've got 30% of our reservoirs over here in Fitchburg and Ashby, and the others over there. So we try to balance it out and, operate the other plant as little as possible. The reservoirs themselves, last year with the drought, probably one of the worst years that I've seen as far as water levels in the reservoirs. Even if we had been selling water, any significant amount, we would probably not have been able to supply that comfortably. So our reservoirs were down so much, and they actually didn't even recharge till it actually filled back up till the beginning of January, which is very unusual. Usually in the fall we have some rains and fill them up. So as far as cutting back on that or something like that, it's not something because we just don't know what the weather extremes, whether we would have. If we knew that we'd never have another drought like that, and we'd be fine, fine, that would be all right, but we really, can't downsize that. We need all that capacity for those, weather events like last year. And we had one a couple of years before that too, that they got down. Last year was worse, but, at this time, not really possible because of the way that the reservoirs are in each area, so.
Okay. So I think just listening to this discussion, we are very fortunate that we have that wiggle room to provide for droughts, for plant closures and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That a lot of other communities don't have that benefit, and I'm sure there's an additional cost there to buying water through MWRA or other sources.
We don't have that ability anyway, but we have enough water, for those periods. Some communities don't, so they do have to buy water, and some of them, last year were right on the edge as far as being able to actually have enough water in their systems in areas closer to Boston, so they really had some issues there. So we're fortunate in that respect. We still have to put in place water use restrictions, which is required by stream flows in the area. It's not per se that we don't have enough water. Mass DEP mandates that once the natural gets below a certain level that we put those water use restrictions on, but yeah, I mean, it is a plus that we can weather those events, really, you know, those extended droughts. And if we had a return drought this year, which we're actually in better shape than we have been in previous years because of all the rain plus all the snow that we had that slowly melted and actually recharged the groundwater. But if we did have a return drought this year after last year, which has happened, you know, back in the 60s, you know, we would be able to still do that without, you know, telling people they can't, you know, brush their teeth or whatever, you know what I mean? Really cut back, you know, so.
So it's fortunate we have that, that capacity, but unfortunately, it does come with a cost that we do have to maintain it. So
the unfortunate aspect of it all is that our reservoirs are all spread out. We don't have one large reservoir and one treatment plant. We have a bunch of smaller reservoirs. I mean, it's great that we have all that, but it'd rather be in one spot. I mean, having 16 dams, there's probably not another water department in the state that has 16 dams that they're responsible for, you know, and that's a huge burden, you know. So, like I said, we'd be better off if we had a couple, even just 2 reservoirs, or, you know, with a couple dams, we'd be so much better off. But there's a lot to take care of, and also watershed around it to protect. So,
all right, thank you very much.
Councilor Schultz.
Yes, I'm looking at the recommended rate increases, Dave, and I was just wondering, you know, that first FY 2024 is at 35%. Could you explain why we can't spread those rate increases out more evenly?
I sure can. Okay. And I'll use this slide to define that. Without a 35% rate increase immediately, that reserve fund balance would either go negative or get to zero. We have lost the ability, without having a rate increase since 2019, to phase in those rate increases. So typically, if reserve fund balance is in a reasonable position, my recommendation would be to phase in a rate increase of the nature of 35%. Unfortunately, that is not the case here. We need 35% more revenue immediately to start just covering the existing obligations, especially to start covering future obligations throughout the forecast period.
And we put off the water rate because sewer had a sequence of, and you'll see what their rate increases are, but we didn't want to burden the customer with our increase plus theirs, so we kind of let them get through their highest one, and they still have some rate increases, but not like they were in the past few years. We're trying to get through that before we actually add it on to our rates. So
it's going to be a hard sell, 35%. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, let's get through sewer, and then I think something that's informative is talking about what the actual customer impacts are going to be on residents using various amounts of water, and what that impact is going to be with a combined water and sewer bill, the increases we're talking about, and then take that a step further and actually look at what are the dollars and cents. You know, with 35%, sounds one way when you actually look at the dollars and cents. So I want to get there, but let's provide some of the impetus on the sewer fund as well before we get to that point.
I just have one more question waiting in the wings. Councilor Gianatali?
With the analysis of the water, specific to this city, one of the issues that I'm not sure if you gentlemen are aware of when you did your analysis is the fact that 11 years ago we increased our sewer rate by 67% in 1 year. And since then, we've had 2 additional sets of increases, with tonight, I believe, being the 4th. And so, unfortunately, the residents, when they get their bill, it's a combined bill. Mm-hmm. Even though in the bill it separates the water from the sewer, that sticker shock 11 years ago has stayed with the residents to this day and will continue to, not realizing at the time that it wasn't the water, it was the sewer. So a lot of residents in the city, a lot of my constituents probably understand everything that's being said tonight and understand the need. But the reason why it's so hard to swallow is because of that sticker shot from the EPA mandate on the separation of the sewer system. I always say to John DeLine and the water department how at a disadvantage they've been for the last decade, because residents look at the total value of their bill. They're not looking at the detail. I certainly have it until fairly recently, where they pay $30 one month and then it goes to $55 the next month. They don't look at, well, what's driving that? Is it water or sewer? It was all sewer. And so with sewer, residents figure flush the toilet, put something down the drain, set it and forget it. But water is more of a commodity that they see, they feel, they use. And so when they see this kind of a presentation, it's hard for them to swallow, not because of the explanation, but because of that sewer sticker shock that lives to this day. If you really look at your water portion of the bill, and I think, is it Sam? Dave, sorry. We're talking about percentages, and I'm looking at, in our packet we got from the clerk on the water rate, the minimum monthly charge, the meter size of 5/8, 3/4, and 1 inch, is that the standard single-family home size?
Yes.
Okay, so right now the current rate is $7.09 minimum, which is up to 200 cubic feet per month.
Yes.
Which is about 1,500 gallons of water?
Approximately.
Okay. $7.09. The rate increase, if into effect, would go from $7.09 to $9.55, and then $10.70 the following year. So the following year, it would only go up $1.15, but for the first year, even though the percentage is huge, and I do this with taxes too, but I like to put this in the dollar value sense and not the percentage, because 35 sounds like, whoa, you know.
I totally agree. And
Counselor, I think they said they had a lengthier delving into that dollar amount stuff at the end of the presentation.
We're going to get into exactly that, because I agree with you. You say 35% rate increase, and somebody just walking down the street, they can't comprehend what that means for their actual wallet in terms of dollars. And we have some slides on the back end of the presentation getting to that exact same issue.
I'll reserve comments on it until after that's done, then. Thank you.
You got it. Thank you. So the overview of the sewer fund, same setup here as we looked at on the water fund. Revenue requirements or the costs broken out annually from estimated 2023 end through the budget of 2024 out through 2028. Exact same analysis that we did on operating expenses, debt service, when debt service is falling off, when new debt service is coming on board to pay for the capital improvements, and that cash funded capital as well. The operation and maintenance expenses are projected to increase by about 16% in 2024 and then go by about 3% thereafter. Over the next 10 years, the sewer fund is expected to spend approximately $15 million annually on capital improvements. The sewer fund has had rate increases over the last 5 years, going up by, on average, about 7% a year. And because of building that up, knowing that these capital improvements were coming, the retained earnings are actually in a strong position to the point where they're actually paying for a significant project in 2024 out of cash. And we're going to see that in just a little bit. But before we get into the details of the project, I'm going to turn it over to Pat to go through some of the background here.
Thanks, Dave. Pat Cotton, Weston and Sampson, team leader, specializing in wastewater. So to follow up on a lot that many have already spoken to regarding the sewer system and the reasons for the rate increases, I'll run through a few slides here to explain the reasons behind why the recommended increases are as they are at 7%. So the system is aging. 75% of the system was constructed between 1890 and 1950. There are over 8 miles of combined sewers that still exist within the system. There is a wastewater treatment facility, the East Chili one, that's still active, requires significant operation and maintenance every year. But the main driver is the consent decree projects. 90% of that $15 million number per year that David mentioned, $13.5 million of it is required by the U.S. EPA, which is mandated by the consent decree. Those projects are expensive. They consist of sewer separation, sewer system evaluation surveys, hydraulic models, capacity assessments, wastewater management plans, and follow-up wastewater management plan updates, leaving the 10% at approximately $1.5 million for necessary vehicles, software, other critical upgrades to the plant, et cetera. So I'll briefly run through this slide. We just wanted to take a snapshot of what it would be for a year of actual penalties if the consent decree, if the city was in non-compliance with the consent decree. So as you can see, the specific fines associated with each CSO and SSO event, days 1 through 15, there's a rate, days 16 through 31, days 31 on. So for 1 year of noncompliance, the city would face a potential $1.5 million fine per year, as long as the city remained out of compliance. It's a very unfortunate situation that the city is in. As I had previously mentioned, the system is aging, again, with the majority of it being constructed between 1890 and 1950. You can see some pictures from 1905. The interceptor is actually still in pretty good condition, surprisingly, due to the old methods from over around 120 years ago. And then the wastewater treatment facility was constructed in 1975, and there are a lot of upgrades associated with the plant. Couple pictures just so that you can visualize the condition of some of the pipes within the city. The old clay pipe cracked on the verge of collapse. So on a positive note, there have been some significant improvements that have been noted, and they have been, and I'll describe a few of them below. So from 2005 to the present day, the combined sewers have been reduced from 20 miles to 8.4, which is over 50% decrease, which is a huge reduction in combined sewers. The CSO regulators have reduced from 64 to 8. Combination manholes are decreasing rapidly. It's really a positive thing. Again, unfortunately, the work has to be done. EPA and DEP went to the plant for a visit with one of the new department heads. They mentioned to Mark how happy they were with the progress that has been being made. So they are recognizing the city's efforts to comply with the consent decree and continue to move forward and be compliant. And when you're in that situation, they look at you in a positive light and are less harsh and less likely to add on to the consent decree as it was entered into with the city back in 2012. So as Mark had briefly touched upon before, with the secondary system upgrades project at the Easterly Wastewater Treatment Facility, the flow volume has decreased from over almost 60 billion gallons per year. So the bypass flow has also reduced from 220 million gallons to 9, which is over a 95% decrease. That's just, it's remarkable, just looking at that number. And the plant exceedances reduced from 309 to 58, and that's due to the hard work that the city has put forth with upgrades to the treatment facility and the wastewater collection system. This is just a brief overslide, really getting into the details of the actual projects associated with the capital improvement plan. I won't get into each individual project. Everybody has the handouts. I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding the projects later on if anybody has any. And I'd like to pass it back to Dave. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. We're getting there, folks. Thank you for bearing with us. We appreciate it. Similar slide as I showed on the water with our proprietary Raftellus database. Should have put that in there. My apologies. showing the outstanding sewer debt per customer. This is above the Northeast average, but again, this is not outside of the realm of normal. There are plenty of communities within this database that were showing tens of thousands of dollars in debt per customer. So again, I think this is just a data point to again, as long as we are managing our debt well, having the rate increases to support financial sufficiency and viability over the forecast period, I don't think that adding new debt to the system is a bad thing. I actually think the actual inverse of that is a very good thing for ratepayers and the city as a whole. So I'll go through similar setup as the water, the projected cash flow with no rate increases. We can see in every single year going forward without any rate increases, there would be a deficit in each fiscal year, which then is indicated on this next slide where we're looking at sewer fund balances with no rate increase. And you can see as that significant project is paid for in 2024 out of cash, utilizing those excess reserves which have been built up, which have been fantastic. That's the purpose of, to some degree, building up those reserves. You can offset future rate increases, which is exactly what we're doing here. But then thereafter, without those rate increases, the sewer fund begins to drop below the targeted amount in 2025. It gets very close to zero in 2026 and actually goes negative in 2027. So it doesn't quite get there as quickly as the water fund would, but still a deteriorating picture without additional revenue from rate increases. Excuse me. So what that means is, again, recommending both minimum and volumetric rates go up by the same amount for sewer. We're recommending 7% rate increases for all 5 years from fiscal year 2024 and to 2028. And again, we're almost there. I'm going to show you what this means in terms of dollars and cents for customers with these 2 rate increases for both water and sewer in 2024 and beyond as well. Just to show you here, this is the sewer cash flow with the projected rate increases. You can see in a couple years we are actually utilizing some of that fund balance to try to smooth out the rate increases. Councilor Schultz, like you asked before on the water side, we do have the ability to do that on the sewer side, and we're doing exactly that to try to mitigate those increases. And you can see that here on the reserve fund balance with the increases. We're drawing that down in 2024 to pay for a significant capital improvement. And then we're kind of maintaining, although we dip down below that target, that gives me no heartburn at all. It does not have to be right at that target as long as we're reasonably close to it. And the fact that we're able to utilize some of those funds to smooth out the rate increases so we're not having sharp fluctuations on the sewer side, this is one of the predominant reasons why we have these reserve funds, and the sewer funds in a great position to utilize that going forward. So finally, punchline here. So we'll go through, I'll just touch on quickly the rates themselves. This is what the current water rate structure looks like, what the rates would look like under 2024 and beyond. This is kind of hard to translate. That's why the next few slides are going to get into what that means for actual customers. The same rates here on the sewer side, just showing the structure of where we are currently and the rates under 2024 and 2028. So we'll start first with an estimated one-person household using 300 cubic feet per month. 100 cubic feet is about 748 gallons. This is not a steadfast rule. There are going to be one-person households that use 2 CCF. There's going to be one-person households that use 4 CCF. It's just a representative picture of a customer using, a low-volume customer, if you will, what their increase would be. So what this shows is a 3 CCF per month customer with a 5/8 inch meter, which is the vast majority of your single-family residential homes within the city, is currently paying $457.20 per year for water and sewer service combined. What that would mean with the 2 rate increases we proposed for fiscal year 2024, 35% on water and a 7% on sewer, that same customer's bill would increase to $527. That is an increase of about $70 per year, just shy of $6 per month, or about 19 cents per day. And so combined there for that customer bill, their bill is going up by about 15% rather than, we looked at 35% and 7%. On a combined basis, it's about 15%, but on a monthly basis, it's $5.82. So that's getting to your dollars and cents question. And then you can see, and I'm not going to go through each individual one of these numbers, but you can see how much those increases that we looked at on the out years from 2025 and beyond will impact customers. You're looking at 9% combined combined increases in 25 and 26, and then 6% increases from 27 to 28, ranging from, in those out years, about $3 to $4 more per month for this low volume customer. Any questions before I move on there?
Councilor Fleming?
I just need a visual. So when you talk about 750 gallons, what is that, the size of an above-ground pool, 18 feet? I mean, just visual when you're saying how much people are using.
Can one of the engineers help me out with that? I'm an economist, so that's much smaller than an above-ground pool.
Yeah. Okay, so we're talking an
100 cubic feet, so it'd be, picture a square 10 feet by 10 feet, 1 foot deep of water. So
I think a lot of people needed that question answered. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I think a lot of people are surprised when they hear how much water they're actually using on an annual basis or on a monthly basis. When you say you're using 2,400 gallons per month, it sounds like a lot, but
to put it in perspective, maybe this will help. At 3 CCF, that's about 75 gallons a day that a person would use. Of course, some days they may use 30 or 40 gallons and then do a bunch of wash one day. It basically averages out to 75. So we find we find the elderly residents use quite a bit less than that. Maybe 30 to 40 gallons on average. So they're well below the 3 CCF a month and fall below our minimum. But maybe that helps a little bit to put in that perspective. Okay. So,
Dave, how long did this study take? How many years was it? I see that some of the photos were from 2021. Was it 2, 3, 4 years?
The main portion of the rate study itself, the financials, has been going on for 8 months now, somewhere in that range.
The rest of the study, overall, when did it get started with?
How long have you guys been working with the city?
Very, very long time. Yeah, I mean, on the water side, 20, 25 years at this point. Probably close on the sewer side.
There's a lot of data that goes into it. It's pulled from the unit system, our usage, those type of things, how much money, how much revenue is generated. There's just so many reports and so many numbers that got to be, pulled from that system and then input into the model to make sure that we're, getting accurate representation of what, people use, what we're expected to generate from revenue based on what rate. So there's an awful lot to it.
Okay.
Councilor Van Hazinga?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just had some questions on the sewer side before we get too deep into the
Fire away. I got ahead of myself. My apologies.
Oh, no, it's quite all right. So I saw the slide earlier that 90% of the upcoming capital spending is going to be associated with the sewer separation. So that's a lot of money. Do you have an idea of just how much we've spent year to date or what the total cost of this project in sum will be?
So we don't have that compiled here today. We could certainly get you that number and what we've spent to date for consent decree items and then what we're forecasted for the next several years.
I'm just a rough number, I won't hold you to it, just in terms of scale. I mean overall, are we spending $100 million? Are we spending $200 million? I mean, where are we going to be at the end of this?
Hundreds of millions of dollars.
Hundreds.
Just for perspective, so the CSO 10 project, which just went out to bid, that's roughly $10 million. And then the downtown combined sewer separation project, which is in design right now, going to bid likely this fall, that's estimated to be a little over $20 million. So just those two projects alone, roughly $35 million. So,
and what is the timeline for finally being done with this and having all the work done, all the consent decree is over, we can move on with our lives?
So 2030 is the target deadline. And basically, we need to complete a combined sewer separation project each year from here until 2030 in order to accomplish that. And that's not taking into account any of the other work that the consent decree requires. So there's a handful of studies that need to be done. There's work that potentially needs to be done at the treatment plant. A tertiary treatment process potentially needs to be added. And all that's kind of hinging on the success of the combined sewer separation work and the numbers that we'll see coming out of the plant once that work is done. So we're keeping our fingers crossed that combined sewer separation is going to lower the phosphorus levels and some of the other levels that we look at to the point that we don't need to do tertiary treatment. But that's very much a reality, or a possibility rather, and it's built into the consent decree. So we have to look at that towards the end of the project timeline, I guess.
So in terms of long-term financial planning, once that's completed, or the main chunk of it's completed by 2030, will we have a situation where there will be outstanding debt that the fund is paying off in continuing years, or will we have an opportunity to reduce rates at that time? Maybe it's not completely, but if we're done paying for it, will there be a benefit to the ratepayers?
As that debt continues to drop off year over year, there will be less of a cost there for debt service. It's not going to all drop off right at 2030, because in the year 2029, we'll be financing a project that'll have a debt service, a debt schedule that extends out years into the future. I think the repayment schedule is typically, 10, 20 years on some of these loans. So we'll have to wait some time before all the debt completely drops off. And as we finish the work required under the consent decree, we're still operating and maintaining the sewer system. We still have to manage those assets. We still have to look at what's starting to decay, where things are at, what needs reinvestment. Just as you get caught up, you got to kind of start all over again. Not necessarily with combined sewer separation, but with making sure that the collection system's in good shape, making sure that you're rehabilitating sewer manholes that are starting to sink into the ground, looking at the plants and upgrading old equipment, that type of thing.
Despite all the work, there's still going to be a large percent of the system that needs to be upgraded, so that's going to continue on. I mean, to put it bluntly, one of the reasons we're all in this particular situation is that the city didn't do anything for decades. Nothing. I mean, we kind of lose that aspect of it, but until the enterprise funds were formed, there was nothing being done to the water, nothing being done to the sewer. I mean, these things are just, and now we have water mains that are 100 plus years old, sewer system that's 100 plus years old, and now it's got to be, some of it's got to be fixed right now, but there's still a lot that needs to be fixed. Unfortunately, we're paying for it all, now.
When were the enterprise funds formed?
I think the water was 93, I think.
Okay. So that recent.
Yeah.
Wastewater is even more recent, I think 2012.
No.
Or a little bit before then, 2010.
2000.
A lot of the revenue all went into the general fund back then, and guess what? It didn't go back into the infrastructure. This is why we're here.
So we're paying the bill now for bills that were pushed off.
If it had all been done over that time, a little bit every year, we wouldn't be where we are now, and that's what we're trying to do now, except it's a lot more costly. We have new laws. I mean, there's new safety standards, materials cost more. If this had been done through the 50s, 60s, and 70s, then we wouldn't be where we are, but now we are. That's the reality, and that's why the rates are what they are.
Thank you, and thank you for letting me interrupt your discussion.
No problem at all. I should have paused after the sewers.
Councilor Giannatalli? No, just on that, the enterprise funds were set up at a deficit, too.
Yeah.
So when the city set up the enterprise funds 20 years ago, they set them up with no capital. So they said, let's set up an enterprise fund and give you guys nothing to start. So wonderful decisions all around the last 30 or 40 years.
That's exactly true. The rates was set back then, and then they had to start generating revenue just to start doing stuff. There was nothing to start. There was no nest egg, nothing to do anything.
The startup capital, I remember that discussion. I wasn't here, but was about 10 to 15 million, and the city gave them nothing.
Yeah.
God bless you.
So it's a whole smorgasbord of things that are why we're in the situation we are in today.
Yeah. Sometimes we forget that history, though. It's like, that, the city didn't do what it should have done decades ago, and now we're, this is why we're here.
I mean, I will say that not to cut into your time, but everybody's expecting that trajectory to start dropping off on the sewer side after 2030. Well, we still have bills to pay for the debt, so that's not going to happen right away. But I would argue, and again, I see what's going on right now. And my goal in this whole discussion is to prevent another one of these from happening 50 years from now. People won't be happy today, but they'll be happy 50 years from now. Those who are young today that will experience it, and those who aren't born yet who will experience it. I think that's part of the problem with today in politics is we don't think 30 years out. We think about what's going to benefit me today. And look what that's done for us now. So my point in saying that is, especially with the sewer rates, I am not saying this because I want people to pay through the nose. What I'm saying is that once we get to a point where we're done with this CSO activity and infrastructure upgrades, as you said, there's still miles and miles of piping on the sewer side that need to be replaced that aren't part of this EPA mandate, correct?
Correct.
So I don't want the sewer department to come before us and lower the rate with all that outstanding. I would expect there to be a pivot in activity. Now that we're done with the EPA stuff, what's the first 10 miles of piping we got to get out of here? You know, and I strongly believe this because this is the 7th rate increase now that I've been part of as a city councilor. My constituents have always been accepting of rate increases if it goes to infrastructure, not to salaries, and don't take that the wrong way, but they want to see a tangible result for the increase. So if the justification is to replace old piping, there is more of an acceptance of that, as there should be, because these things don't last forever. So that would be my expectation on the sewer side, is we do not get complacent after that. We have a lot more to do. Keep it going. There's no sticker shot at that point. People have already experienced it. So let's not drop the rates, defer maintenance for another 30 years, and then have another 80% increase in 1 year for another 20 years. I mean, let's not repeat the sins of the past. So I'll talk about water later, but that, on Council Van Huizenga's point about the rates, that's my expectation too, is for them to dip. I don't expect them to be as high as they are, but I don't want to go back to pre-CSO levels, because I want there to be an honest plan of these 10 miles, and we don't lower the rates when we can't do that work. We need to do that work then and put that to bed. So
two comments that kind of illustrate your point. So when we separate combined sewers, typically we turn we install new drainage, and then we leave the old sewer system kind of in the ground. That's one approach. The other approach is that we turn the old sewer into a drain, and then we install new sewer. So for some of our projects, we've got new sewer infrastructure, new pipe in the ground. For other projects, we've got new drainage in the ground, but old sewer pipe. So the goal after all this combined sewer separation work is complete, is to go back to those areas where we left the old sewer pipe in the ground and start replacing the failing infrastructure there. So you're absolutely correct there. And one of the things that the consent decree requires, and that we do on a very good job with actually, is we CCTV inspect all of our sewer lines. On an annual basis, we get through a large chunk of the city, and every 5 years or so, we get through the entire city. So each segment of pipe that we have on the sewer side is graded and put into a GIS database, so we know exactly what it looked like, what its failures were, what condition it's in, et cetera. So we've got a great handle on exactly what we need to do as soon as the combined sewer separation work is done and the consent decree work is complete. So we're in a great position to do that, and we'll get there one of these days.
Before I go to Councillor Squalia, I just want to comment, since I came on the council, one of the consistent things with the sewer, with City Hall, with the streets, with everything, has been, like Councillor Ginitali said, a story of paying now for having kicked the can down the road. And I think the important thing that people need to take away from all this is that really, you can't kick the can down the road. I don't even mean it's a bad idea. I mean, you literally can't. Because when you think you're kicking the can down the road, what you're really doing is kicking the snowball downhill. What you have to pick up later on is exponentially larger than what you started with. And so I'm glad. I've said this a bunch of times over the last few years, but I continue to applaud the city departments for making these long-term plans and investments, and not just looking for, what's going to make the ratepayers happy tomorrow or in November, but rather what's going to keep the city on a good course for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So thank you for that. Councillor Squalia?
Thank you.
I just have a question on the minimum. So is the one-person household, is that slightly above the minimum, this?
On the water side, yes.
It's slightly above the minimum on the water side?
On the water side, yes.
Because, because it looks, I have, just looking at my own account, and my minimum is $33.90. So this is just a little above the minimum, but for illustrative purposes, this is basically the minimum payment, close to?
Close to it.
And so we're talking about, $38.10 a month currently for a minimum customer, basically. And then that would be going up over 5 years to $44 a month, $48 a month, $52 a month, $55 a month, to $58 a month, right?
I didn't do the math to take these totals and divide them by 12, but I trust that you did that correctly, yes.
Yeah, so for a minimum usage customer, they're seeing much less of a major increase.
Much less than what? I'm sorry.
Financially. If people conserve more water.
If people conserve more water, they will pay less.
They're seeing a lot less of an increase in their payments.
Any customer that uses less water will pay less on their bill. That is true. On a percentage basis, this is about to get repetitive as I go through all these different customer types. They're all going up approximately by the same percentage, but there's obviously different amounts in terms of dollars that they're going up by.
Right. So, for our customers that are seniors that use a small amount of water, for our customers that are lower income, harder to shoulder large increases, we have the rain barrel program that we're currently doing to conserve more water. Do we have other programs or opportunities for our customers that find it more difficult to shoulder these large increases, ways to conserve water?
Yeah, we have a system anytime they call, but we also have the Water Smart program, that we help, seniors with, sure they don't have leaks and things like that. So, most seniors are pretty good if they see their water usage go up. They'll contact us and try to figure it out. And we'll even send somebody out to try to help, diagnose the situation and stuff. So a lot of times it's just a leaking toilet or something like that needs to be replaced. So we do try to assist them in those areas.
So you can log into the Water Smart portal and
Point of
check and
order.
see if there's...
Sorry?
Point of order.
Okay, I've got a point of order on what grounds?
We're talking about rates, not how we're right now, but we're just talking about the rates that are in front of us. That's another discussion, what we're getting into now.
That is true. Let's discuss water conservation efforts at another time, just because we've already been here for 2 hours.
I would like to say that when we looked at changing the rate structure, we were worried about any impact on seniors, and what we decided on was not to adjust the rate structure so that we wouldn't impact them, minimize the impact to them. So, yes, the minimum is going to go up, but most seniors are using below the minimum, particularly, single seniors. So there will be a slight increase, but not, a significant increase. So.
All set, Councillor? Yeah. Councillor Brochman?
We all listen to what it says in front of us. One of the reasons why we're in front of you for a rate increase is because people are conserving water and they're not making enough money because we're conserving water. That's the reason why we're here. Ask me, I'll tell you. Am I right or wrong? You told me that. We're not selling as much water as we like to sell because we're not making a profit.
Our usage is definitely down over time, so.
And we're giving out rain barrels to save water, and people are using it to flush their toilets. Oh, that's it.
Okay, that's not, the take, regardless of what our consumption is, do the pipes get healthier if there's less consumption?
No.
Does the water turn brown?
We'd rather see more consumption because a lot of our water system, we have a water system that's set size for much larger higher usage. So we have per se, a lot of stagnant water in the pipes because it doesn't get changed over much because of water conservation, particularly in outlying areas. So when we do, water main replacements, we a lot of times will, go from a 12-inch down to an 8-inch or something like that. So no, the water conservation doesn't help us, whether revenue or water quality or water main wise.
I understand it doesn't help you. That's simple logic, because water usage tied to sewer is based, that's how your bill is based, how much you use.
Yeah.
But there's got to be a minimum charge because everyone's connected to the system. But the reason why this is being proposed is because of deferred maintenance for decades, because of deferred increases when we should have had them, okay? Even if people were to not consume as much water, how many miles of piping in this city need to be replaced? Water piping.
60 miles at least.
At least 60 miles.
Right now.
What would be the number in 10 years if we did nothing right now?
No, it's just going to keep going up. So.
Okay, so 60 miles of piping. How many pipes are there? How many miles of piping is there in the city of Fitchburg?
About 196.
Okay, so we're talking at least a third of our system is in exceptionally poor condition.
Yes.
And that's growing by the year.
Yeah.
So that's why, is that not the primary reason or the primary applicability of these increases, what that's going to go to?
Yeah, we haven't had enough revenue to do it in the last few years, and we need to, increase the revenue so we can start replacing water pipes because we're just,
And your
losing the battle.
your office has a plan, I take it, for the next 5 years if this goes through, as to where and how many pipes we're going to be able to act on with this increase.
Yeah.
You see, this is a subject where people don't think about any of it until the water pipe bursts, until their water is discolored, until their pressure is low. Then they start to complain, rightfully so, and say, why is this happening? Oh, we haven't fixed the pipe in 100 years. Well, why haven't you fixed the pipe in 100 years? You see, it's a never-ending cycle. And the water department is like the roads.
Point of order.
So,
Counselor. Mr. President, the gentlemen from Weston and Sampson are here to make a presentation. I think we should let them make it if there's no further questions for them, so that we can deliberate after and everybody can speak after. But we're only about halfway through the presentation, and these gentlemen are being very patient, but I think we should let them continue now.
Thank you, Counselor.
Mr. President, we pay them, so they can wait as long as they have to.
Counselor.
I agree.
Counselor, they've indicated that they're more than willing to answer questions, and I appreciate that. But I do agree that we should stick to questions during the presentation and leave argumentative comments, which I don't use in a pejorative way.
Ask the Deputy Commissioner 4 questions in the last statement.
Yes, I'm just
what are we
saying
talking about here?
Stick to just the questions for now, and you'll have your chance to make deliberative comments at the end, just so we can get through this, Counselor.
Okay, I'll play this game. Go ahead. I'll play it next time someone wants to speak. Go ahead. Go.
Counselor.
I'm getting sick and tired.
Counselor, that's enough.
You know that?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Just to, again, this is going to get repetitive. I'm going to get through this as efficiently as possible. But just before we move on from this, again, a low-volume customer is going to see in 2024, with the increases that we stated, $5.82 more per month. Building that into two-person household, kind of double that of that one-person household, a little bit more usage, 6 CCF per month, still a 5/8-inch meter. That customer is paying about $982 per year for water and sewer service combined, and that will increase to about $1,100. That's a $149 increase per year, $12.41 per month, or 41-cent increase per day. And again, that's right around that 15%. And you can see how those are going to change over time through 2025 and 2028. Obviously, the most important increase we're talking about tonight is fiscal year 2024 to get both funds in strong financial positions. A four-person household using 12 CCF per month is spending about $2,000 per year. Currently, for water and sewer service, would increase to about $2,340 or so. It's a $307 increase per year, $25 or $26 per month increase, 84-cent per day increase, and about 15% again.
So I do have one small question on methodology here. I see that for a 1-person to a 4-person household and a 2-person household, you're just using a straight multiplier on consumption. I'm just curious, is that what you actually tend to see in practice? Is mom, dad, and 2 kids 4 times as much as a bachelor or whatever?
In practice, it's all across the board. And unfortunately, this meeting's already long, and if we were to tell you every individual, every ratepayer's bill, what their increase would be. But it is fairly linear, but there are obviously going to be exceptions to that rule.
Okay. I was just
depends on
curious
the
if that
household.
was the general pattern that you saw.
Quickly, it depends on the household makeup. I mean, if you have 2 parents with young, 2, 3-year-olds, they're probably not going to be too bad. They'll probably be below that average. Whereas you have 2 parents with 2 teenagers that are in high school sports that, taking a shower day and night or whatever. I mean, we've heard that from customers. They're going to probably be at or above that. So, people that are conservative have, put in low flow fixtures, keep an eye on their water use, or, we'll keep below that. I like to think that we didn't skew these low or high. If anything, that may be on a touch high side. I know that's a benefit from our viewpoint, but we didn't, this is what we actually see in the water department. Again, elderly people are significantly less than that, but there are some families in older houses that may have some fixtures that aren't low flow and a couple teenage kids or 2 or 3 of them, and then they have some pretty high bills.
Gotcha. Yeah, like I said, I just wanted to get a picture of.
But as Dave said, it's hard to get everyone. We just want to give an idea, Yep.
Yeah, ballpark figure, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't kind of an oversimplified assumption, but it sounds like it isn't. So. Thank you for clarifying. Councilor Boschman, do you have something on that?
Yeah, I just want to ask you a question. This is per month on this right here. Is it per month use or is that per year?
That is, the bill is per year.
Per year?
Yes.
Christ, I'm way off. I own a multifamily, and my bills, I told you that before, my bill on my apartment house on $3,123 is a lot higher than that. I'm already at $3,000. My average bill is about $450 a month in my 4-family.
Point of order. Point of order. We're not going to talk about personal rates.
Yep, Councilor. We'll stick to just the questions for now.
Well, I understand that, Mr. President, but there's a lot of high-class apartment houses in the city of Pittsburgh.
Councilor, questions for now, discussion after. All right, so did he answer your question?
For a while tonight, I can tell you that right now.
It's all right. My kids have been getting used to me not being home for bedtime, so maybe on the weekend.
I know how you feel.
Yes, I know a lot of people do. That's fine. It's my wife I have to worry about. Move on. 2 more customer bills, and then I'm going to get into a couple slides on affordability analytics very quickly through some miscellaneous charges, and we'll wrap up and we can get into all the discussion and questions that you want to. Just looking at an average commercial customer bill using 100 cubic feet per month with a 2-inch meter, that customer is currently paying about $14,000 combined annually for water and sewer service. That would increase to about $16,455. That's a $2,200 per year increase for both water and sewer service. $184 per month, or about $6 per day increase.
Councilor Fleming?
What type of business would have a 2-inch meter that would accrue that bill every month? Just for...
John, do you have a good representation in town?
It's going to be retail.
A restaurant that was fairly busy. Perhaps, some of the cannabis facilities. Grey Wolf has a couple 2-inch connections.
Okay. Actually, as you go on with the presentation, maybe you could just elaborate on that, because...
Yep.
Thank you.
Sure.
Again, it's not a perfectly typical
No,
customer.
but just an idea.
Everyone's a little bit different,
Yeah, just
unfortunately.
an idea. Thanks.
Final customer impact slide, and maybe, John, you can find an analog for this while I'm talking through this, but this is a kind of a high-volume commercial customer, 100 cubic feet per month with a 6-inch meter. This customer is currently paying about $37,000 per year for water and sewer service combined. In 2024, with the increases that are recommended, that would increase to $43,193. That's a $6,000 or so per year increase, $500 $1,000 per month, or about $16.55 per day.
Yeah, again, Great Wolf probably has a 6-inch connection. A couple of the large condo buildings may have a 4 or 6-inch connection. Those are, the type of places that would have that.
All right, thanks.
I thought it would be helpful to talk a little bit about affordability as we're just provide some context around what we're talking about in terms of these rate increases. The first being, in 1997, EPA's financial capability assessment, there was something that came out of that, of looking at the residential burden indicator, of basically saying it typically was used on, or initially used in wastewater consent decree negotiations, and basically saying if typical residential, there it goes, we just lost some, typical residential customer's bill exceeds 2% of the median household income for a service area, that would be deemed unaffordable. That has over time been adopted by the water industry as well, and basically said if a combined water and sewer bill exceeds that of the median household income of a service area by more than 4%, that would be deemed unaffordable. We looked at this by census tract as well as just the community as a whole. In both the scenarios, like currently and under the 2024 option where we're looking at the rate increases, that percentage of a typical customer's bill as compared to median household income is significantly below that 4% threshold. Now, is that a perfect science? No, but it's at least an industry metric that we look at as a benchmark to say we're not even getting close to that 4% metric. Actually, it's right in like the 1.7, 1.8 range. We also looked at that by census tract, and obviously you can see, census tract 7107 is lighting up red there, but that census tract has a median household income of less than $20,000. That's everything is a burden to households in that census tract with a median household income of less than $20,000, not just water and sewer service. This slide, I think it's really telling. This is a cost per gallon for different liquids. If we go all the way to the right, this is a cost per, it's not even quite a full gallon for Dunkin' Donuts coffee right here in Fitchburg of $19. Go left, $3.42 for a gallon of milk, around $3.10 for a gallon of gasoline, $1.23 for a gallon of bottled water, and all the way on the left there where you can't see any blue because it's darn near non-existent is a gallon of Fitchburg water. Less than a penny per gallon. If you were to put into the newspaper a want ad saying, somebody please deliver me water 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. I want it to be clean. I want to be able to give it to my kids. I want to shower with it. I want to cook in it. And I want it for less than a penny a gallon. The only person or the only group that would be able to respond to that and say, I can do this for you, is the city of Fitchburg. And I know this is a bit of a silly analogy, but I think it really puts into perspective what we're talking about here. Having good, clean, safe water and sewer service is necessary for livelihood. We're not talking about cell phone bills or cable bills, which there's an argument for why those are so important. I understand that. But we're talking about something that is quite literally critical to human survival. And doing it for comparatively to other commodities, fairly cheap. And I know we're talking about increases here, but I think we need to remember the context of the value of water and all the service that residents are provided that would not be provided to them if it weren't for the city of Fitchburg.
I have a question of the previous slide.
Counselor?
Back to the affordability analysis. So the current 7107 census tract is unaffordable already. And that's kind of your point, is the water rate currently is unaffordable?
That is my point.
And any future increase will also be unaffordable.
That is my point. But I think everything that those households that have less than $20,000 in median household, or less than $20,000 in household income, everything that they're spending money on is unaffordable to them. It's not just water and sewer service, it's food, it's healthcare, it's transportation, heating, electricity, all of those things. We're dealing with this all across the board within the industry. I was just in New York City a few months ago with the American Water Works Association talking about Water 2050 and economics and affordability and trying to solve this issue. And what we quickly realized was that part of the problem we have is a societal poverty issue. It's not because water and sewer bills are too expensive. It's because we have a portion of our population, and this is just nationwide, there's a poverty issue that everything is a burden to them. It's not a water and sewer issue. We think water and sewer is affordable. It's just that these households are in poverty and they're overburdened by everything. But it's not significantly impacting more so than they already are, if that's answering your question.
Was there a discussion on more affordable, some sort of affordability metric for this small census tract in the city of Fitchburg that is less than $20,000? Was there a discussion on that, or are the communities doing any sort of?
Yeah, it's a great question. There are communities that are doing things, but they are, unfortunately, at this point in time, very administratively burdensome. There's a lot of red tape to get through. It's not as easy as, say, like the SNAP program or LIHEAP or something like that to get assistance to water and sewer customers, especially those who might be renters. And they're not paying water bills and sewer bills directly. How do you provide them assistance? Does that assistance go to the landlord, and then you're going to be you're going to assume that they're going to pass that down to the tenants? There's a lot of administrative tape. We're getting, and this is one of the things I talked about in New York City with this group of folks that we were with, is how do we make affordability programs more acceptable and accessible to communities so they can provide potential funding or solutions to low-income customers and help reduce that burden. Now, if we were to waive the water and sewer bill for that customer that has $15,000 of annual income, is that really going to help them that much or bring them out of poverty? No, and that's why we think this is more a societal issue. But there are things that can be done, and that doesn't mean that the water and the sewer industry as a whole shouldn't be doing something, and we're trying to evaluate what that could be.
But we're not there yet.
We're not there yet.
Overly administrative burdens to try to do that on our own individually. It needs to be more of a large-scale effort.
Very much so.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor Van Hazinga?
I just had some information in regards to that census tract that was being discussed. The reason why the incomes are so low is that the majority of the housing units in this census tract are income-restricted affordable housing, subsidized housing. So the way this is structured is that rate increases would not go to the residents of these properties because the amount they pay for rent is calculated by formula, which includes the cost to provide utilities. It's based on gross rents. So really the people who would be paying these rent increases are the Fitchburg Housing Authority, New View Communities, and other owners of the subsidized buildings in downtown. So there is an insulating layer between the effects of these rates and the residents in these buildings, which make up the majority of the census tract.
That's great context. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor.
We're almost there. Just a few things on three slides on water miscellaneous charges. Again, miscellaneous charges have not been updated in a number of years as well. Met with John multiple times and Nick as well, just trying to understand the time and effort associated with doing things outside of just normal providing service to customers. Fire protection is one of those things. The city has scaled its infrastructure to be able to respond to the unfortunate event of a fire. The infrastructure could be smaller if it weren't for that, and there's a cost associated with that. There's a capacity-related cost associated with that. We're trying to reflect that. So what you see here on the screen is just the increase in those private fire protection charges based on the line of the size of the fire line.
I have a question on this slide.
Councilor?
So the condominiums up on Rollstone Street, I heard from them a concern of an annual inspection for each unit for the sprinkler service. Is this what we're talking about?
No, this is separate.
So what is this?
This is up, that will be in one of the next slides. This is just for a building that has 4-inch fire protection, 4-inch fire line, larger commercial buildings, some apartment buildings and things like that. So they'll have an annual charge, a readiness to serve charge. We don't meter that water. So basically this is a charge, an annual charge, what was it? Can you go back one slide?
Sorry, John.
4 inches below, it'll be $200 a year just to have that service and available, so.
So for example, a condominium unit might have a 6-inch service.
No, they won't even have that.
Okay, for a number of,
Some might, some of the larger buildings, the ones that you're talking about were really done that way to the financial benefit of the developer.
but regardless, they'll have just an annual increase.
Yeah, and that's coming up on the next slide.
This is from the water department side, not for the fire department inspection side.
This is water department, correct?
Yep. So the backflow testing that you see there, going from $85 to $95, that's the annual test for the backflow prevention program. Each of those condo units has a fire protection system in there, and there's a backflow device on that to prevent that unsafe water from getting back in their plumbing system. It's really for their benefit. It does protect the distribution system, but say a condo has 70 pounds going into that unit. We have a water main break and the pressure drops to 60 pounds or 50 pounds. That water would come back out of the piping if that check valve didn't hold and then contaminate the plumbing within the condo itself, which could end up causing, illness or something even more serious. So
But these are annual fees, right?
Right.
These are
Right.
miscellaneous, backflow testing is not an annual requirement.
yeah, it is. Yep.
Like a condo unit has.
Yeah, and some of them, not the condos, but some of them are required to be done twice a year. And this is actually mandated by DEP. I mean, I talked about how it protects the people, but it is mandated by DEP that any backflow device has to be tested. If it's a double check valve, it's once a year. If it's what we call an RPZ, reduced pressure zone backflow device, it has to be done twice a year because that usually means something, something protecting like a heating system with chemicals in it or something like that from getting back in the public water supply.
And the hydrant flow test has gone up 500%. Don't we usually do a hydrant flow test when we're
Designing a sprinkler system, yeah.
Designing a sprinkler system, putting a new building, new construction, new business,
Yeah.
expansion of business.
Yeah, we raised that quite a bit because that usually requires at least, never mind the coordination, but requires a couple people, from the water division to operate the hydrants, all the coordination. So it's usually half a day to do that or so. Plus we got to deal with the discolored water afterwards and usually do some flushing afterwards. So we really wanted to raise that to represent,
The actual cost.
the actual cost of it, so the customers aren't, paying out of their portion of it. So
Okay, thank you.
otherwise, it's fairly small increases for the most part. So.
And would I be correct in assuming that of the charges on this page, most of them would fall on commercial landlords and developers, not largely on...
No, some of them would be residential customers.
Okay.
Depending on the situation, so.
Okay.
Somebody has a system that's seasonal or something like that, they want us to remove the meter, it'll be $125 for our person to go out and store the meter or something like that, That's one example. Of course, meter tampering is self-explanatory, but.
Right. I feel no sympathy for anyone who's paying more for meter.
Absolutely not, so, yeah. And then there's work outside regular hours. I mean, sometimes people do not call us when they should during regular hours for something that's leaking. They'll call at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, which requires a call-in minimum time for our people. So we really need to cover those costs, and even the $200 doesn't quite cover it. It should probably be more, but we also, want to make it too much of a burden for those type of situations. So,
gotcha.
Of course, if it's our responsibility, then that charge isn't there. But if somebody's neglectful with their house or calling a leak or something like that, on after hours or something like that, then we have to charge them for that because we have to cover our overtime costs.
Right.
Okay.
Councilor Van Hassinger.
Just real quick, so this fee schedule, is this designed to be revenue generating source, a general revenue generating source for the enterprise fund, or is this just to cover the cost to provide these specific?
Kind of to cover the cost. The backflow testing covers like our backflow and cross connection program, to keep the water system safe. We have like 1,400 backflow devices in the city, so it covers those costs. We try to make sure that the customers are covering the costs because we actually have, right now we have an outside consultant doing part of it, but we usually have 2 employees doing it full time when we're fully staffed. So we're trying to cover all that cost so that, the customers aren't paying for that themselves, just the elderly or something like that isn't included in their water rate. So, but as far as an overall the money generated, it's not a lot compared to the water rates for each of these items.
Yeah, so, I mean, really, I can see the meter tampering fee is just to dissuade someone from doing that, but it's really to cover the cost to provide these services, and customers only pay this if they need those specific services.
Right.
Yes.
And with the meter tampering fee, I mean, it's going up to $500. I mean, we do have people that tamper with meters. We discover it at some point. They also get charged up to 3 times the amount of water and sewer that they were found to have stolen, in addition to the tampering charge. But sometimes we find that they just tampered with the meter, ripped the seal off or something like that. Maybe, didn't go to the point of actually stealing the water and sewer services. But we're pretty hard on them because we don't want, we want to make sure we cover all those costs because it's not fair that, somebody doesn't pay their share,
Same with the unauthorized hydrant use. I mean, that's a situation that's potentially going to cause dirty water situations where we have to flush hydrants and all that stuff to try to clear the water quality out. So we need to capture that time and effort and wasted water.
And actually, that was going to be my next question. On the unauthorized hydrant use, are they also charged for the actual water flow that they cause?
If we can calculate it, yes. Sometimes it's difficult because it's not metered. We do have a authorized meter hydrant use charge where we actually go out and put a meter on it and a backflow device to prevent. Sometimes a hydrant, what we find is a hydro seeder will go out to the end of our line, and it hasn't happened in a while, but that has happened in the past where they'll go and steal the water from the hydrant, just fill their hydro seeder. Well, that's also a possible cross-contamination hazard because now they're sticking in a hose without any type of backflow device, similar to the condos, and that could, if we had a water main break or a fire, where water was being used, it could pull that back in. So, it's a very serious thing that could happen and has happened, Whole distribution systems in the area have been contaminated by hydro seeding, a situation like that. We just want to make sure we avoid it and make sure that we have fines to dissuade people from doing that.
Certainly.
I have one more question.
Go ahead.
One more question on this slide with the hydrant flow test. So, going up from $100 to $500, what are other surrounding communities charging for hydrant flow tests? Have you looked into what other communities charge, and are we within the range?
Oh, we're definitely within the range. Some are higher and some are lower. So, I don't have specific examples, but they try to recover, some of them will bill on a per hourly basis, the personnel. So, a lot of times it'll go back to that, do that calculation, do a labor charge, but we just want to do a straight charge. So we know that it's going to be, 2 people, some coordination before, a couple, usually 3 people from the water division are involved. Operating 2 hydrants and then some flushing afterwards. So there's 3 people for about half a day. So we want to make sure that we recover those costs. So our main reason for determining 500 was the labor cost to cover that.
I just have a concern over if businesses are coming in and seeing this large charge and them saying, I don't want to do business with the city of Fitchburg if that's what they're going to charge for that.
Yeah, no, this is small in the scale of things when they're designing a system. So the fire protection engineers, I'm sure, are getting much more for the design of the fire protection system in the scale of things. This is a small cost for something like that. So.
Okay.
Last slide. System development charges, these charges are for new customers connecting to the system. System development charges are utilized to force new customers to buy into the capacity in the system. So you can think of all the infrastructure that's in the ground currently. All the existing ratepayers have been paying for that infrastructure since the beginning of the water and the sewer systems, or the water system in this instance. It's reasonable to assume that a new customer should at least buy into the capacity that is already in the ground to be able to provide them service. And that's what these charges are for both domestic services as well as fire protection services, going up from current levels to updated for 2024 and beyond at the percent or the dollar changes that you're seeing here on the slide. Any questions about these?
This is for installing new lines?
Yeah, a new house or a new building or something like that would be the connection charge.
All right.
We did it. Thank you so much for your patience getting through that. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. This has been very informative. I am going to ask that councilors try at least to ask any further questions they may have at this time.
Councilor Zarella, could we take a 5-minute break? It's been 2 hours already. Just a quick break.
Any objection? All right, let's recess for 5 minutes. We will return at 8:36. Session at 8:37. Now, what I was going to say is I would encourage any counselors to ask any questions that they may have before we engage in substantive deliberation, so that we can let, these excellent gentlemen who are not elected to be here until 10 o'clock get home to their families and dinners. Councilor Squalia.
Yes, so I mostly want to be able to accurately reflect the situation to my constituents, right? So then when they say, oh my God, my bill went up, whatever it is. So now we said 35% for the water, 35, 12, 12, 5, 5. But then you have on the example slide a different number. Is that number something that I can tell the constituents that's what we can expect to see their bill?
Definitely want to downplay the 35%.
Well, 35% is a scary number, but so all of these examples, they all have basically 16%, 15%, 9966. That's the combined increase? So if I tell a residential customer, you can expect your bill to go up by 15% next year.
Yes.
Okay, and then 9% after that.
As long as they are both a water and sewer customer, which I imagine they are, yes, that would be an accurate statement.
And if it's just a water customer, then it's 35%, 12, whatever it is.
Right, and we do have some of those across the city. So we have some water-only customers, we have some sewer-only customers. They exist, and so if you're talking to those constituents, just mention the respective rate increases, not the combined.
A sewer-only customer would have like a well for water, and then they have connected to the city sewer?
Yeah. Not common, but I think there's a few in the
And we
city.
do have some.
Depends on the ward that you're
on
in.
septic systems that have public water, so.
And on that subject, I'll just chime in. Would it also be correct to state that anyone who has a differential usage in their water and sewer will not see these percentages, but will see something slightly different, like someone who has a sprinkler system for their lawn or something? I know that's not metered for sewer, but it is for water.
Yeah, they'll see the 35% increase on that irrigation, that amount billed on irrigation.
Gotcha.
On irrigation.
Any other questions for our panel? All right, in that case, if no one objects, I'm going to tell you guys, have a great night, and we'll deliberate this. You guys can eat and kiss your families.
Oh, that's
Would you mind if we stayed?
Oh, I don't mind at all. Not at all.
We've invested time, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't interested. So
Okay, no, by all means, by all means.
I wrote them above.
No.
All right, Councilor Van Hazinga?
All right, so, Councilor, did you have a question?
No.
Okay. The city provides a lot of services. Some are discretionary, some are non-discretionary. And it's nice that we have a library, but you know what? If we don't, we'll survive. Water and sewer aren't particularly discretionary. We need clean water. We need to take away our wastewater and treat it. We don't have an option there. We have to do it, and there's costs associated to that. And the city's kicked those costs down the road for a long time, and now we got to pay them. And so we don't really have much of an option. And as was mentioned earlier, 35% sounds kind of scary. So I went and looked at my bill and my water usage to see, well, what does that actually mean to the dollars that I'm paying every month? And I'm coming well below your estimates for households. I have a 5-person household. I have 3 kids that range from middle to high school, and washing machines running every day, dishwashers running every day, they take showers, and I'm under 5 CCF a month, and I don't know how, but and really, in terms of money, that's...
Check the meter.
They just replaced it. They were in last fall. They replaced it.
It's hard to find a typical household, but we do see people with 5 people in a household that use well below the average. And
I'm sure there's households that are higher, that have older fixtures. I'm sure there's many that are lower, that smaller households. But I looked at my bill, and that 35% sounds scary, but it's an extra less than $7 a month that I'll be paying. And it's not insurmountable. It is an increase over the course of the year, but it's relatively small. Sewer, with a 7% increase, I'm looking at a $3.43 increase per month. It's not that much. So all told, my bill is going to go up just over $10 a month, so just over $120 a year. It's not that much, and we get a lot for that. And we see some communities where the water system isn't taken care of. What happened in Flint, Michigan recently, and that's disastrous. That we can't have that. We can't have a system-wide failure where we don't have safe water to drink or safe water to bathe or to cook with. That's a huge problem, and we have to take care of our infrastructure. And the costs, I don't think, are out of line. They are manageable. It is if you look at percentage-wise, a big increase, but I think it's something we have to do, and we don't really have much option to.
Councilor Gianatali.
President Zarella mentioned that analogy of a snowball going downhill. And we were just talking during the break how, in my experience over 15 years being here, from the recession to now, the bottom of the hill has been within these last 15 years. I feel like we've been punched in the face repeatedly with mistakes made decades ago, and they're just catching up to us now all at once, whether it's sewer, water, finances, you name it. So we have seen and experienced as a city what happens when you don't take care of things when they first start, or when you don't accordingly plan for taking care of those things. We have seen what happens when you kick the can down the road repeatedly. We've been experiencing as ratepayers and taxpayers in the city for 15 years. This is what has occurred. So for us to not repeat the sins of the past, we cannot defer on this. How long do you defer? Things will get more costly and will get worse. And these are hot-button commodities. These are necessities. Sewer and water infrastructure, they're necessities. They touch every business, every homeowner, every renter, everybody. And because of that, it would be foolish on our part to defer this some more. With that said, what Councilor Van Huizenga was talking about is what I was bringing up earlier of the dollar value. And when you do that, you may have some people perk up and say, well, he is an elitist, or he doesn't understand that there are people where $10 a month is a lot. I'm a realist. Okay, when we talk about water infrastructure and sewer infrastructure, $10, even $20 a month is not a lot. When you compound it over days, it's less than $1 for cleaner, safer water that you drink, bathe, cook with. And this isn't because we are giving people 50% raises or because we feel like the residents aren't hosed enough. We were told earlier tonight that over 60 miles of our water infrastructure right now is in failure or is near failure. 1/3 of our infrastructure is already past the point of no return. And that number will get worse each year. As a city councilor, how am I to overlook that? I know my forefathers did. I'm not going to make that same mistake. And I think the people need to understand that by not making that mistake again, it will over time be less costly to them if we don't avoid it now. So we need to stop doing what we've been doing and address these problems once and for all. And so when I saw the package and I saw the presentation, these are those kinds of situations where I look at it and go, what choice do I have? I can say no, but we know what that choice would lead to. So in a way, for me, there is no choice but to say yes to this. How can we do any more of what we've already been doing? We can't. And if if people don't like this, what is the alternative? Where's the money coming from? These are enterprise funds now. This is not effectuated by your property tax. Okay, so when we try to dollarize these increases, we're trying to bring people back to earth on what this really means to their pocketbooks. Because many people, when they hear the word increase, they shut off. I don't care what it is. I don't care why. You're just hitting me again. But they need to know what it is and why. And so $10 a month, if there are many of our constituents in the city that go to Gourmet Donuts every day, let's say, and gets a large iced coffee, it's $3.80. And if you do that 5 times a week, that's $20 a week times 4, that's $80 a month. For many residents, I'm sure they get coffee every day. $80 a month. What I was saying earlier about the water department being at a disadvantage is, if you look at the bill, the water number is always lower than the sewer because the sewer is like 2/3, 33, or it's almost double what the water is in usage. My bill is usually $57 a month combined, and I use, like Councilman, I'm 3. I'm the minimum almost with a 4-person household. The water portion of my bill is $19.62 a month. It's pennies a day. And yet I go and get a coffee for almost $4 a day every day. Just to put that in context, it's way less than what I pay for my cell phones, way less than what I pay for my utility, my heat and electricity, way less than I pay for cable, internet, and phone. And it's the most important thing of all of those that I consume and touch, water. So when that rate increase hit 12 years ago for the sewer, it blinded everybody to what the actual impact of the water was because the bill is combined. So I just want to point out for people that the sewer portion, you have heard this for 12 years now, why this has to happen. Anyone who's lived here the last 12 years, who's a ratepayer, shouldn't be surprised by this. When the former commissioner, deputy commissioner was here, Mr. Morosky, as far back as 2012, he told this council, he told the residents, you're going to see this going on through 2030. That has been transparent from the start. The water has not been as much because the water has been not under a consent decree, but we may head there if we don't do what we're supposed to do. I didn't even appreciate this. A lot of what we need to do outside of the normal pipe replacements are DEP mandated now. So what do you think is going to happen if we defer on those? What do you think DEP is going to do? They're going to do what the feds did. They're going to fine us. They're going to bring us to court, and then we're going to raise the water rates exponentially higher at one time than just like the sewer. So I am not going to repeat the sin of the past. I'm not doing that. This is not something that politically should be a negative. We need to make sure that we do the right thing now because we haven't up to this point. And so with that said, I will support these increases for a variety of reasons already stated, but I really hope the residents, and we'll do our best to get this out to them, to show them these pipes, to show them this information, with the caveat that we're not blind to the fact that costs are so much more today, and that everyone is making less. Whether you do well at your job or not, you're not getting the raises that meet inflationary costs. Everyone's doing worse right now. But again, we're at a breaking point here. And the residents in this city are tired of hearing that. It's so cliche at this point. They've been hearing it since 2008, but this is the last piece of it, in my opinion. They heard about the sewer, they knew about the budget, now it's the water. How much longer are we going to let the water go by the wayside? And so when it comes to things like this, you can't put a price tag on clean, affordable water, clean, safe water. You can't. We'll be in a lot bigger trouble with a lot of people if we don't do this. So with that said, I thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. And I look forward to, if this passes tonight, a very detailed capital plan on sewer and water needs with respect to piping, even locations, something tangible we can tell the residents. Unlike road paving, here are the water lines that we need to start hitting as soon as these take effect. So these people see tangibly how it is directly affecting their neighborhoods and their homes, because this water goes through those pipes. We need to be open with them immediately and show them where their money is going to go, primarily, even including the infrastructure projects, everything. We've got to put a big APB. So thank you very much, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Councilor Krucher.
I don't want to belabor the points between Councilor Van Hazinga and Councilor Di Natale. In fact, I hate doing that. But this is, we don't have a choice unless you want to be going to the Nashua to do your laundry. That's really what we're looking at here, is that the water's not going to get to the homes unless we do something. And personally, I like to be able to turn my shower on and have water available. I like to be able to flush my toilet and have the stuff go away. This is a no-brainer, and we have to do it. And for my residents up on like McIntyre and Alpine, who have either one or the other or none, they're both water, they're well and septic. Consider yourself lucky, because you're not going to have to deal with this kind of stuff. I know it's expensive because I grew up in a house where we had septic and well water. Problems like that happen, but you're not going to be dealing with rate increases like this. But overall, this is something that we have to do and we don't have a choice. I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Schultz.
I guess I would be negligent if I didn't ask, it hasn't been brought up, do we need to do all of these years? I mean, we've got a lot of capital improvements to do. Is there any chance that we could qualify for some grants for capital improvements down the road that might mitigate these increases? I mean, can we do 2 or 3 years rather than all those years that we've got listed? I guess that's the question I have.
So I guess a partial answer to that question regarding obtaining future grants for some of this infrastructure work. Unfortunately, the way that the building, the bipartisan infrastructure law kind of got pushed down to Massachusetts, at least, is through the SRF loan program, which we take heavy advantage of on both the water and the wastewater side. So we're already taking advantage of those programs. They include very low interest rates, principal forgiveness, and a few other benefits. So I don't think there's much of a future opportunity to find additional monies there. Certainly we'll keep our eye on that, and that reduces the need for either cash payments for future projects or future bonding. I would be very cautious about going through a rate increase prior to the completion of the 5-year term that we're proposing, just because of the magnitude of the work that we need to do and the time in which we need to complete it. These aren't projects that are optional for the most part. The consent decree work on the wastewater side is mandated. We've got a very clear picture on what we need to do from now through 2030. On the water side, we've got a number of projects that are mandated by the administrative consent order that we're under. And then we've got a number of projects that we just need to complete because it's going to improve water quality and quantity and supply to our customers. So I think in order to guarantee that those projects are able to be completed within the next 5 years, it's prudent to stick with the 5-year plan.
We couldn't do 2 or 3 years and see where we're at in 3 years from now rather than doing all 5?
The problem is when we go, the work that we're going to be doing the next 2 or 3 years, there's payments that those future rate increases are going to cover. So if we don't have the ability to pay for them, we may not be eligible for the loans. Yeah.
So, I mean, we got some money from the American Rescue Plan for some of our projects, as you know, Commissioner Erickson. So I'm just hoping, if the state does well, that maybe there'll be some more grants down the road for infrastructure, but, you know, I had to ask that question anyway.
Yeah, and I think
we had looked at it. I mean, we really, they talked about it at the beginning of the presentation, the mayor did too, but we spent a lot of time looking at minimizing, what the rate increase would be even in the future years, and, being able to make those, loan payments in 2027, 2028 and thereafter. That's what, carries us out to there, because if you look at our capital and what we need to do in the next 2 or 3 years, there's a lot more loaded at the front just to get caught up on some things. Some of them mandated, some of them absolutely necessary, and later increases will pay, are going to be used to make the payments on the money we're borrowing next year, the year after, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, and specific to the ARPA funds, that's kind of a once-in-a-lifetime gift to the city, and it's kind of predicated on a response to a pandemic that I don't see happening in the next 3 to 4, 5 years or so. I don't think you're going to see that type of response, frankly, ever again. So we've taken into account that we've been given that ARPA money for those water projects, and that's incorporated into the rate study here. But if you look historically at some of the market crashes that we've had back in 2008, again right around this time period now, each time that federal dollars have been allocated to water sewer infrastructure, it's always been passed down to the states through the SRF program. It was the same way back in 2008, it's the same way now. And I wouldn't expect that to change in the future if a ton of federal money all of a sudden became available. And then if you look at the national debt that keeps growing, I don't think it's going to be feasible to infuse such a large amount of cash in future years, definitely not within the next 5 years that we're talking about here. So some of my thoughts on that piece of it, at least.
So you don't see it being forecast in the future, within those 5 years?
I do not. No.
Thank you. I yield the floor.
Thank you. Councilor Brochman.
I just want to point out to some of the councilors, I'm surprised John DeLine didn't bring it up. A couple of years ago, and Marcus, he can tell you too, we spent over $2 million on River Street fixing it all up. And if I'm not mistaken, John DeLine knew there was a pipe that was not too old, it was real old and should have been replaced, but he did not have the money to replace it. So we paved over that work. We spent $2.5 million fixing up River Street. And 6 months later, the water main broke. And it cost us more money. Let me explain something. I'm going to vote in favor of this because I want clean water. I want a good infrastructure. When I flush the toilet, I want to make sure it goes down to the wastewater treatment plant, not the Nashua River. So when I'm swimming in the Atlantic Ocean, I don't want toilet paper flying by me or anything else near me. That's how I feel about it. I'm all in favor of clean water and clean air and everything else. So I'm not going to, fight against it, fight against the raise. I'm really upset it took us so long. The only thing I looked at this rate increase, to be honest with you, if I would have been in his place, I would have said $5.67 the first year, make it $6. $6.35, make it $6.50. $7.11, make it $7. $7.50, make it $8. $7.84, make it $8. It's all going in one place. It's going to go back into the infrastructure. I'd rather do the work when it's cheaper and do it now than wait 3 years or 5 years down the road when cost of everything's gone even higher. That's how I feel about things. And I'm running for re-election too, but we got to do this work. And if we don't do it, we're a bunch of fools.
I thought you were running for mayor.
I am, probably do. That's why you wanted $160,000 a year.
That's right.
God help us all.
Councilor Squalia.
Well, so my comment is the perfect segue from Councilor Schultz and Councilor Boschman. So Councilor Schultz was suggesting like a 2 to 3 year plan, and Councilor Boschman was suggesting that, we go even higher on the rates. So what's the 10-year plan? Councilor Boschman was suggesting that we should have raised the rates before 2019. So we have a 5-year plan now for raising the rates. What's the 10? What's the 20-year plan? have we looked at any numbers beyond FY '28? What are we thinking for the future?
We have looked at that a little bit. It's not included in this presentation because we don't necessarily want to be locked into it. We don't know what's going to happen necessarily in 5 years. One of the things that was developed with this effort by Weston and Sampson and Reftalis is the development of a financial model that we can use annually to update our actual versus projected revenues, expenses, et cetera. So that's something we're going to build into, on an annual basis, the budgeting process. And I think that's going to give us a clearer picture of what that 10-year plan looks like as we get into year 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5 of this rate increase here. I think our goal is, instead of not doing rate increases for many years in a row and then whacking people with a large rate increase after 3, 4, 5 years, is to kind of match the pace of inflation almost, and then have a smaller rate increase year over year. But who knows? Maybe by the time we get to year 5, we're in a much better financial position on the water and the wastewater enterprise fund side, and we can look at taking a year off. And that's something that I think as we build out this model every year, we'll get a clearer picture of the variation and how it matches up to inflation and all that.
And then piggybacking off Councillor Zarella's question a while back, we'll never expect to see the rates go down. That's never going to realistically happen.
No, but it'd be nice to see it slow down the pace of increase. So, I mean, we did project out 10 years, right, Dave? And it seemed to be stable. But there is an increase each year, like 5% for water and 7% for water going out 10 years. But we didn't feel comfortable, presenting that. You don't want to vote on for 10 years, But we hate to see any increases, but we do see it stabilize rather than seeing big bump ups in the future. So we'd be able to, do this work and keep it at that. And maybe in 5 years, maybe it doesn't have to be that high,
So with this 5-year plan, we're not expecting
we're hoping
big trajectory. We're hoping for a more flattened.
With the current model we have, we're expecting rate increases to levelize after this 5-year period. But I've been doing this long enough to know that things can change significantly within 5 years. And to forecast out past that point, the crystal ball gets really fuzzy, and I think it would be we would be doing a disservice to the city if we recommended rates to you for years 6 through 10 at this point in time. I think, as Nick mentioned, an annual update to the model and just check where we are. Hopefully things are better than we expect, and then continue to reevaluate. But to go out any further than that, I think, would be irresponsible at this point in time, just given the unknowns.
Thank you.
And the reality is that even these rates now are higher than, are exacerbated by the increase in raw materials and everything, I mean, our rate increases are higher now than, if we hadn't had, such inflationary, pressures in the last couple of years. So, if we've been running at 2% every year, guess what? We wouldn't be paying as much for water pipe. We wouldn't be paying as much for chemicals. You wouldn't be paying as much for electricity. But now, it's kind of carried through to this. In addition to us having to do this work costs more. It costs more to run the plants, costs more to electricity, heating, fuel, and stuff. So it's, and hopefully, inflation does, start to edge back downward and be a bit more stable in the future, and that would help us, past year 5. So.
All right. I have Councillor Brochman.
One other question, my final question. John, I'm going to support for your rate increase, like I said, but I want to make sure I don't see a fleet of new trucks up there when I drive up there. That's for sure. I'd like to see it on the water mains. So I'm letting you know ahead of time so you won't say.
We have a lot of old trucks.
Well, I want to make sure we still have them. All right.
Councillor Schultz.
Cruz.
Sorry, Cruz.
I know we look alike, but...
Oh, yeah, yep. I get you guys mixed up all the time.
Thank you, Mr. President. A lot of my questions have been answered, and I won't keep, going on and repeating everything. But I do want to say, a lot of it for me is a responsibility. And if you take a look at other parts of the country where they weren't responsible and they were negligent, and we're nowhere near that. But if you take a look at a place like Flint, Michigan, that poisoned its city with its water by being negligent. We have responsibility here, and this is It stinks that the rates are going to go up, but, it's what we have to do. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Thank you. I'd just like to comment briefly, not to reiterate anything that's already been said, but I do want to go back to, we had a slide that was showing the cost per gallon of different liquids. And it's true, it was kind of, a little, what was the word you used?
I can't remember what I used, but dramatized maybe is a good word.
Yeah.
Silly?
But I want to, silly, okay, but I do want to focus in on those first two columns briefly, and thank you for bringing that back up. Sure. When you look at the price of bottled water, you need to understand that with a very few exceptions, as long as we're not talking about like the designer water or whatever, if we're talking about standard off-the-shelf gallon of water, almost every brand you can buy in the store is essentially tap water. It's processed, it's from the same reservoir type sources that we get our water from. It's processed the same way, and then they bottle it and charge you $1.23 a gallon.
Actually, less regulated.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's true. That's a good point, Counselor. And our water, I can remember a time when Fitchburg water wasn't that great. But at this point, the water that comes out of the taps of Fitchburg residents, unfiltered, unless they have, problems in their plumbing, is every bit as good as any bottled water you're going to buy at the store. And you're getting it for less than 1% of the price. I want to reemphasize that for everyone because, believe me, I have friends and relatives who are on fixed incomes and who, maybe can't easily spend an additional $10 a month. But you're not going to just go without water. And there is nowhere you're going to get water cheaper at this quality level. We're not saying, oh, it's cheap. It's not very good, but it's cheap. It's cheap and it's good. If you're not buying some of the health food store water or something, then the water you're getting is probably worse than what we're pumping into your house as in the city of Fitchburg. So just bear that in mind. I know there are residents in the city who are going to feel a pinch from this. If we could avoid it, we would be. We heard about the efforts that that this team made to try to minimize increases, and certainly I think I can safely speak for all of us on the council here when I say that if we had any bright ideas that would minimize this further, we'd be proposing it. But this is what we've got, and given the circumstance we're in, given the legacy we were left by, as we've been told, poor choices in the 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever, given that, this is a very good proposal. This is fiscally responsible. It is sensitive to the needs of the community to the maximum extent possible, and it will continue to give us genuinely excellent water quality in this city. So thank you again, both to our excellent consultants and to the constant work of our water and wastewater departments.
I make a motion we accept 98.99.
Second.
Thank you. I was just about to ask for that. I have a motion and second. If there is no objection, we'll take this by unanimous consent. Seeing none, it is unanimously approved. We do not have a special session of the council scheduled for tonight, so this will be taken up and reported out to the full council at our next regularly scheduled meeting on the 18th.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you.
I want to say thank you very much. I'm sorry for getting mad, but Mark is getting me mad. No,
I have a motion and second to adjourn. Seeing no objection, we are adjourned.
Didn't see you, Matt.